Mirabel felt helpless and heartbroken. She wanted to give her sister the kind of love and care their mother had given, but she had nothing. Many nights, after feeding Celine and watching her fall asleep, Mirabel would sit by the crib, wipe her own tears, and whisper promises to her baby sister. "I'll take care of you, Celine. I'll never leave you. One day, things will be better. I promise." Even though she was still young, Mirabel carried the heavy weight of motherhood on her little shoulders, driven only by love and the memory of her parents' kindness. Linda and John were a happy couple who loved each other very much. They had two beautiful daughters named Mirabel and Celine. Mirabel was just 9 years old, and Celine was barely 4 months old. Their family lived a very comfortable life because both Linda and John worked hard. John was a businessman. He often traveled to other countries to buy goods and bring them back to sell. He made a lot of money from his business. Linda worked at a big oil company. Her job also paid very well. Because of their hard work, they became very rich. They lived in a big, beautiful mansion, owned many expensive cars, and could afford anything they wanted. Life seemed perfect for them. They gave their children the best things in life: good schools, lovely clothes, and anything they wished for. The family enjoyed traveling and spending time together, but one day, something terrible happened. A tragedy struck their happy home, and from that moment, everything changed. Their lives, once full of joy and luxury, took a different turn. One day, John had to travel again for his business, just like he always did. He packed his bags, kissed Linda and the children goodbye, and promised to return soon. Linda and the girls waited eagerly for his call to say he had arrived safely, but this time, something went terribly wrong. There was a plane crash. The news spread quickly across the country. Linda's heart dropped when she heard about it on the television. She tried to stay calm, hoping and praying that John was safe. But soon, the list of names of people in the plane was released, and John's name was among. The list confirmed that John was one of the people who died in the plane crash. Linda was devastated. It felt like her whole world had fallen apart. She cried for days and could not eat or sleep. The strong, happy woman she once was, slowly disappeared. Her heart was broken, and the pain was too much to bear. She found it difficult to go to work or take care of the children the way she used to. Even though she still had money, none of it could bring John back. Their big house now felt empty and lonely. After the news of John's death, Linda struggled to stay strong for her daughters, Mirabel and Celine. She did her best to keep life normal for them, even though her heart was still broken. But what many people didn't know was that Linda had another battle. She was asthmatic. She always carried her inhaler with her wherever she went because she knew an asthma attack could happen at any time. One night, something terrible happened. It was very late, and the house was quiet. Mirabel was fast asleep upstairs. Linda was alone, sitting in the living room, thinking about her life and missing John. Suddenly, she began to have trouble breathing. She realized she was having an asthma attack. Panic filled her heart. She quickly searched for her inhaler, but then she remembered she had left it upstairs in her bedroom. Linda tried to stand up and rush upstairs, but her strength was already failing her. She fell to her knees and began crawling toward the staircase. Her chest felt tight, and her breathing became harder and harder. She managed to reach the first step, but she couldn't go any further. Desperately, she tried to call out for Mirabel, hoping her daughter would hear her cries and come running. But no sound came from her throat. Her voice was trapped, just like the air she was struggling to breathe. Slowly, Linda's body grew weaker, and she could no longer move. In the darkness of the night, alone in the sitting room, Linda took her last breath and died. The house remained silent. Upstairs, Mirabel and Celine slept peacefully, not knowing that their mother was gone. The next morning, the sun rose gently over the house, but something felt different. Mirabel woke up and stretched her arms. She looked around her room, expecting to see her mother checking on her like she always did. But the room was empty and quiet. Thinking her mother had already gone downstairs to prepare breakfast and get her ready for school, Mirabel got out of bed. She brushed her hair quickly and called out, "Mummy," but there was no answer. She walked downstairs, still feeling sleepy, her little sister Celine still sound asleep in her room. As Mirabel reached the living room, she froze. Her heart stopped for a moment. There, lying on the floor, was her mother, at first. Mirabel thought maybe her mother had just fainted and needed help. She rushed over and shook her gently. "Mummy, wake up," she cried, fear rising in her chest. But Linda didn't move. She felt cold. Tears filled Mirabel's eyes as she realized something was terribly wrong. She screamed for help, her voice echoing through the house. The neighbors heard Mirabel's loud cries and quickly rushed to the house. They were shocked when they saw Linda lying lifeless on the floor. Some of them tried to wake her up, while others called for help. But it was too late. Linda was already gone. One of the neighbors picked up Linda's phone and went through her recent contacts. They found the number of John's brother, Uncle Matthew, who lived in the same city and often visited the family. They quickly called him and explained what had happened. Uncle Matthew arrived at the house in no time. His face turned pale when he saw Linda. He knelt beside her and cried quietly. After a few moments, he stood up, wiped his tears, and took charge of the situation. Because Linda had no parents alive and her husband was already gone, there was no reason to delay. Plans were made immediately for her burial. Within a few days, Linda was buried in a simple ceremony. The neighbors, friends, and a few family members came to say goodbye. It was a very sad day. Mirabel, holding Celine in her small arms, wept bitterly by her mother's grave. After the burial, the big question remained: who would take care of Mirabel and little Celine? Mirabel was just a young girl, and Celine was only 4 months old, a tiny baby who needed constant care. It was clear that Mirabel and little Celine could not live alone in the big house. Uncle Matthew and his family decided to move into John's house to take care of the children properly. It made sense because the house was already big enough, and it was where Mirabel and Celine felt most at home. Before all this, Matthew and his wife and children had been living in a rented apartment in the city. The truth was, they were only able to live there because of John. When Matthew and his family were still living in the village, John, seeing the struggles his brother faced, decided it wasn't good for the children to grow up there without good schools and opportunities. Out of love and kindness, John moved Matthew and his family to the city. He paid for their rent and even helped Matthew start a business so he could support his wife and kids. But even with the business, Matthew often needed more help. He would sometimes visit John's house asking for assistance, maybe money for school fees, food, or to settle debts. John and Linda never turned their backs on Matthew and his family. They always treated them like their own. They believed that families should stick together, and they never once made Matthew feel like a burden. They gave freely, with open hearts, and were happy to see Matthew's children getting better chances in life. Now, with both John and Linda gone, it was his turn to step up and take care of Mirabel and baby Celine, just like John and Linda would have wanted. So Matthew, his wife, and their kids packed their things from the rented apartment and moved into John's mansion. It was a big change for them, going from a small space to a big, beautiful home. At first, everyone thought that Mirabel and little Celine would be fine. After all, Uncle Matthew and his wife had moved in to take care of them. The house was full of people now, and Mirabel hoped that things would feel a little normal again, but she was wrong. Matthew and his wife were not as kind and loving as John and Linda had been. Deep in their hearts, they were happy that life had changed for them. They thanked God for what they called a blessing. They were now living in a big, beautiful mansion without paying a dime. No more small rented apartment, no more struggling for money. Matthew didn't waste time. He quickly took over John's business to keep it running for the sake of the children. But instead of saving the money for Mirabel and Celine's future, he used the profits to live a life of comfort. It didn't stop there. Matthew and his wife asked Mirabel for her parents' ATM pins. One thing about John and his wife was that they let each other, including their daughter, know their ATM pins and their phone passwords. At first, Mirabel was confused and scared, but they pressured her and made her believe that they needed the money to take care of her and her baby sister. Feeling helpless and too young, Mirabel gave them the information. With access to John and Linda's accounts, Matthew and his wife became rich overnight. They spent the money carelessly, buying things they had only dreamed of when John was alive. As time went by, Mirabel and little Celine were no longer treated like family. Matthew's wife would shout at Mirabel for no reason, ordering her to do house chores all day. Little Celine, now a growing toddler, was left mostly in Mirabel's care, while Matthew's children went to the best schools and wore the best clothes. Mirabel was made to stop school. Mirabel often cried silently at night, holding her little sister close. She missed her parents terribly. Even though she lived in a mansion, she felt like a stranger in her own home. The people who were supposed to protect her and Celine now treated them like they were nothing. It soon became even clearer that life had truly changed for Mirabel and little Celine. Matthew's wife was supposed to help take care of baby Celine. After all, Celine was still just a tiny baby who needed constant love, feeding, and attention. But from the very first day they moved into the house, Matthew's wife made it clear she was not there to babysit anyone's child. She didn't want anything to do with Celine's care, so everything fell on Mirabel's small shoulders. Mirabel, though still a child herself, became like a mother to her baby sister. She would wake up early every morning to bathe Celine, clean her up whenever she messed herself, and carefully feed her. Mirabel did her best, even though she didn't always know what to do. Sometimes, as she bathed or fed Celine, she would break down in tears. She would remember how their mother, Linda, used to pamper little Celine, how she would sing sweet songs, feed her rich meals filled with milk, fruits, and all the best things a baby could have. Their mother's love had been warm and full, like the morning sun. Now, all Mirabel could give her baby sister was plain pop, without milk and sugar, because Matthew's wife refused to buy anything extra for them. Mirabel felt helpless and heartbroken. She wanted to give her sister the kind of love and care their mother had given, but she had nothing. Many nights, After feeding Celine and watching her fall asleep, Mirabelle would sit by the crib, wipe her own tears, and whisper promises to her baby sister. "I'll take care of you, Celine. I'll never leave you. One day, things will be better. I promise." Even though she was still young, Mirabelle carried the heavy weight of motherhood on her little shoulders, driven only by love and the memory of her parents' kindness. Life for Mirabelle became harder with each passing day. Even getting a little money to buy pap for Celine became a big problem. Whenever Mirabelle asked for money to feed her baby sister properly, Agatha, Matthew's wife, would snap at her, saying there was no money. She would tell Mirabelle to feed Celine whatever she herself ate, as if a tiny baby could survive on scraps meant for an older child, but the truth was that there was money. Matthew and Agatha were spending heavily on themselves and their own children. Their children wore fine clothes, carried fancy school bags, and ate rich, delicious meals. Yet, when it came to Mirabelle and Celine, there was always an excuse: no money. No food, no help. Mirabelle was treated worse than a housemaid. During mealtimes, while Matthew, Agatha, and their children sat comfortably around the big dining table enjoying plates filled with rice, chicken, and fruits, Mirabelle would be stuck in the kitchen. She would be washing plates, mopping the floor, or cleaning pots, often with little Celine tied to her back with a piece of cloth. She wasn't allowed to eat with them. No one even asked if she was hungry. When she was finally done with all the work, Mirabelle would quietly eat whatever was left for her in the kitchen. Sometimes a few cold pieces of yam, sometimes a small plate of rice with no meat. She would manage to eat and find a way to feed Celine, but Celine wouldn't eat it. When her uncle and his wife are out of the house, Mirabelle would tie her sister at her back and go out begging strangers to please give her some money to buy pap for her little sister. Then she would buy pap with some money while keeping the other for next time. Many times, she ate with tears running down her face, feeling abandoned and forgotten in her own parents' house. But no matter how hard things became, Mirabelle never gave up. She stayed strong for Celine. She knew her little sister depended completely on her. One night, while everyone in the house was fast asleep, Mirabelle was awakened by the sound of little Celine crying beside her. At first, she thought maybe Celine was just hungry or needed to be rocked back to sleep, but when she touched her sister's small body, her heart sank. Celine was burning hot with fever. Mirabelle sat up quickly, panic rushing through her. She remembered how, when their mother was alive, there was always a neat little medicine box in the house. Their mother knew exactly what to do when they were sick. She would take out the right medicine and gently treat them. A simple fever never lasted long with their mother around, but now, everything was different. Mirabelle searched the room helplessly. There was no medicine box. There wasn't even a simple paracetamol tablet. She remembered that after her mother died, Agatha had taken almost everything from their mother's room: clothes, jewelry, important papers, and even the precious medicine box. Nothing was left for them. Mirabelle wrapped Celine in a thin cloth and held her close, trying to cool her down with her hands, but she knew it wasn't enough. She wanted to go wake Uncle Matthew or Agatha, but deep down she knew they wouldn't care. They would either shout at her or tell her to manage till morning. Celine cried and cried, her tiny face scrunched up in pain. And as the minutes passed, Mirabelle, feeling helpless and broken, began to cry too. She sat on the bed, rocking Celine back and forth. Mirabelle felt like the whole world had turned its back on them. No parents to comfort them, no medicine to heal them, and no one to even care that they were suffering. Holding Celine tightly against her chest, Mirabelle whispered through her tears, "Please don't leave me too, Celine. Please be strong. I'm here. I'm here with you." When morning finally came, Mirabelle was already tired and weak from crying and watching over Celine all night. Celine's fever was still very high, and she was now too weak to even cry loudly. Fear filled Mirabelle's heart. She quickly carried Celine and went to her uncle, Matthew. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Uncle, please, Celine is very sick. I need money to buy medicine." But Matthew barely looked up from his newspaper. Without much care, he said, "Go and meet my wife. Tell her." Mirabelle's heart sank, but she obeyed. She went straight to Agatha, who was still lying pretty on the bed, and repeated her request, hoping Agatha would show some mercy. Instead, Agatha gave her a harsh, angry look and snapped, "Am I your bank? I don't have any money to waste. If the baby is sick, she will be fine. Don't disturb me." Mirabelle stood there, tears running down her cheeks as Agatha turned away without another word. Feeling completely abandoned, Mirabelle wiped her tears, tied Celine securely to her back with a cloth, and stepped out of the house. She didn't even know where she was going. She only knew she had to beg for money before it was too late. As she walked helplessly on the street, praying in her heart, she saw one of their kind neighbors returning from a night shift at work. It was Auntie Rose, a woman who always smiled at her whenever they passed each other. Auntie Rose noticed Mirabelle immediately, the sadness on her face, the tiredness in her steps, and the baby crying weakly behind her. She rushed to them and asked, "Mirabelle, what is wrong? Why is the baby crying so much?" Mirabelle explained in broken words. Auntie Rose didn't waste any time. She carefully untied Celine from Mirabelle's back, touched her forehead, and shouted in shock, "This baby is burning with fever." Without waiting another second, Auntie Rose hurried with them to a nearby pharmacy. The pharmacist quickly attended to them. After checking Celine, he gave her an injection to bring down the fever and handed Mirabelle some medicines to continue treatment at home. He told them it was a good thing they came when they did. If they had waited longer, it could have been too late. Mirabelle couldn't stop thanking Auntie Rose, who even paid for all the medicines. With a heart full of gratitude and relief, Mirabelle held Celine close, whispering, "You will be fine now, my baby. God sent someone to help us." For the first time in days, Mirabelle smiled a little, not because everything was okay, but because someone had finally cared enough to help them. Far away from home, something very strange had happened, something no one knew yet. John, Mirabelle and Celine's father, was not dead. When he traveled for his usual business trip, his first flight had safely landed in another country. The plan was for the passengers to rest for a few hours before continuing their journey. It was during that short stay that trouble came. John was sitting beside a man he didn't know, a stranger who looked restless and nervous. What John didn't realize was that the man was a drug smuggler. Out of fear of being caught, the man secretly hid some packets of illegal drugs inside John's bag without John noticing. When it was time to continue their journey, the airport security did a thorough search. To John's shock, they found some drug packets inside his bag. At the same time, they found traces of drugs in the stranger's bag too. Immediately, both John and the man were arrested. John tried to explain that he had no idea about the drugs. He begged them to believe him, but the authorities didn't listen. Everything he had, his phone, money, passport, was seized. He couldn't even contact his family back home to explain what had happened. Meanwhile, because he missed the flight, he was not on the plane that later crashed and killed all the passengers. The same crash that the news had announced him dead in. John was stuck in a terrible situation. Months passed. While the police continued their investigations, John stayed in detention, suffering, helpless, and heartbroken, thinking about his wife and children. Finally, after a long and painful investigation, the police found out that John had been telling the truth. They discovered from security cameras and questioning the drug smuggler that John was innocent. He was completely free of guilt, but clearing his name had come at a great price. John had spent every penny he had on lawyers, fines, and paperwork. He was left with nothing. All he had was a desperate heart that longed to see his family again, to hug his wife, Linda, and hold his precious daughters, Mirabelle and Celine. John had no idea of the tragedy that had already struck his home. He didn't know that Linda had died from an asthma attack, or that his daughters were suffering under the care of the very people he trusted. But now, he was free and ready to return home and find his family.